The four components of reading are alphabetics, fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension. We recommend that in your lessons with your students, you touch on each of these four components, as teaching a combination of all of them will improve your students' overall comprehension. As you can see on this diagram, the four components overlap with each other. All four of the components are needed to make up one's ability to read well. And if someone is deficient in one of the areas, that's going to ultimately affect their ability to comprehend. The first component is alphabetics. Alphabetics is the process that readers use to identify words. This includes phonemic awareness, word analysis, and sight word recognition. This is when students are corresponding the written letters with the sounds that they make at the very basic level. Alphabetics should be taught in sequential order. For example, someone wouldn't be able to recognize a combination C-A-T or the word cat if they didn't know that the sound for the letter A is ah.
Fluency in reading has to do with the idea of sounding natural and comfortable. Whether reading out loud or silently, readers should try and read with a natural rhythm and with lots of expression. They shouldn't go too fast or too slow, and they should be taking pauses that would occur naturally between phrases. This means that fluent reading should be mimicking natural conversation, because the more natural reading sounds, the easier it is to follow and understand the material. There are lots of different types of activities you can do to help your reader build their fluency. If you're working with an individual student, you might want to try echo reading, where you read a sentence out loud and then your student reads the same sentence back to you, imitating your rhythm, expression, and pauses. If you're working with a whole group of students, you can try choral reading, where all the students in the group read the same material out loud together, taking cues from each other for pauses and expression. Poetry, speeches, and scripts are really great passages to use for these types of activities because they're designed to be delivered orally and with lots of expression. The next component is vocabulary. Vocabulary refers to the words that a reader knows and understands. This can include both words that the reader knows when they read them in print and the words that they recognize when they hear them spoken out loud. For example, a reader with weaker alphabetic skills may know the meanings of many words that they hear in conversation, but then they may not recognize those same words when they see them in print. This is an example of how a deficiency in one component can affect a reader's ability to perform in another component. Once you and your student have made a list of vocabulary words, a great activity to use is called a vocabulary quadrant. This is an example of a vocabulary quadrant that I made with my students when we came across the word bloodshed in a passage we were reading. To fill out the quadrant, first we put the vocabulary in the first block. Next, we filled in the next block with the definition that we made with help from the dictionary. Then on the second row, we filled in the example box with the sentence that we had seen in our reading passage. You can also encourage your students to make up their own example sentences because that might help them remember the word more. Finally, we filled in the antonyms box with opposite words. A lot of times it's easy to overlook antonyms when you're talking about new vocabulary words, but remember that sometimes the easiest way to understand the meaning of a new word is to understand what it doesn't mean.
Comprehension is the end goal of reading. Many people point to having trouble with comprehension, but what we find is that they may have a deficiency in one of the other components of reading that's affecting their comprehension. Comprehension is the process of understanding the text. Students will be able to connect the text to what they already know in the world, what that book or that passage reminds them of. That's a sign of comprehension. They'll also be connecting not only to what it reminds them of, but what is happening in the world around them. And then the final stage being connecting one text or one book to another book that they read or an article. Another piece of comprehension is understanding what you do not know. So recognizing as you're reading along what you did not comprehend is an important skill to be able to practice when you're practicing your comprehension. There are lots of ways to practice comprehension. Graphic organizers are a wonderful way to practice comprehension. Some strategies and ways to practice comprehension also are summarizing, identifying critical information in a text, marking the text, so putting a check mark above where you understand something or a question mark above where a student may not understand something, being able to determine the author's purpose, creating inferences, understanding main idea and details of a text, doing think-alouds or visualizations, and studying idioms. Those are all ways to practice. A wonderful website that helps with comprehension is www.tv411.org. It's a great resource for adult learners.